The FNRad Snowboard Podcast is presented by Vans. Season 7 of FNRad is sponsored by Wired Snowboards, The Boardroom Snowboard Shop, Anon Optics, Time Bomb Trading, the Canadian distributor of Dragon, 32, Stance, Sandbox, and way more, and Tribute Board Shop in Nelson, BC. Anon Optics creates stylish frames and superior clarity lenses for men, women, and kids. Anon snow goggles feature a full spectrum of lens tints, cutting-edge frame designs, and fog-eliminating tech for superior clarity in all conditions. Anon pushes the performance of snowboard goggles with revolutionary features like the Magnetec magnetic lens change system, MFI magnetic face mask integration, and Perceive lens technology. All Anon goggle designs are co-developed with Anon helmets and face masks for a fit that integrates perfectly together to maximize comfort and protection. Find the right fit at an Anon dealer near you. Ernie DeLost is a not often heard from founding father of this thing we call snowboarding. Does your board have a kicktail? Do your bindings mount to a track with sliding hardware? Do you have sublimated graphics on your top sheet or base? Ernie and his team at Snowtec invented or developed these ideas and many more out of a love for snowboarding and building better equipment. He's the founder of Capital L Manufacturing and a close friend of Chuck Barfoot, who he still works with today 30 years later. Chuck, who just had a birthday, is soaking up the sun in Florida after healing from a minor health episode a couple of years back.
I was there. Yeah.
Oh, man.
So Chuck had a minor episode with like a stent put in one of his arteries. And then he was working here the whole time with me during that. And he kind of recovered, and it was like a year had gone by, and he went to the doctor and they gave him a clean bill of health. Said, hey, go ahead, do anything. And literally like a week later, we went snowboarding. I said, Chuck, you want to go snowboarding? He's like, yeah, sure. So my wife, my daughter, and him, we all drive up to local mountain here, Big Bear Summit. We're riding. We get out. We get everything. Me and Chuck go up the lift, come down the hill. He's riding just like he's never stopped, right? All the way down. We get back on the lift, and he's like, my chest kind of hurts.
Oh, no.
And he's rubbing his chest. I look at him, and we're riding the lift, and I knew he was a little bit... There was something really bugging me, and Chuck's a tough guy, so he wasn't really letting on, and I kept looking over at him. I could tell it was really, really bothering him. As we're getting nearer the top, he's like, I think I'm just going to go down and relax, and then I'm thinking, damn it, we're in altitude now. I didn't even think about that, but he just got the clean bill of health, so I convinced him to go into the ski patrol area, so I got him in over there, and then next thing you know, it was a life flight over to the place, and that's when he had like the quadruple bypass. And
that's massive.
Yeah, he's back east now. He's back living in Jersey with his mom, and he's doing really, really well.
Good.
But it definitely, screwed things up for a few years with him. It was a tough thing who would want that? Jeez.
Yeah. So when did you first meet him?
So Chuck, back when we were in New York still with Snowtec, I had called Chuck up a couple times and even like sent for one of his catalogs or something back then. And this is early 80s, So, God, it had to be 82, 83, something around there. And then we were just talking on the phone, and we would trade information and say, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And Chuck was always, a great guy. So in 85, I was at a trade show in Chicago showing Snowtec boards, and George Powell from Powell Peralta, he came by and he visited us at the booth and started checking out the snowboards and was very, very interested in it because we were doing some pretty, unique things with the snowboards even then.
Yeah, the Snowtec boards that I saw upstairs. Would that profiled board be like an 85?
The one I showed you was probably 83, 84.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy jeez.
So George wanted to get into snowboarding. So I had two partners at the time, my original mentor and still a great friend, Doug Baxendale, who was a lot of the genius behind the early Snowtec stuff. And George, we were talking, but just in Doug and our other partner, Craig, they were kind of going in a direction I didn't want to go into at that time. I wanted to, I wanted to still just wanted to manufacture a lot more and do what a little bit different. So, we had our different ways of going. So I went to work for George. George hired me, came out to Santa Barbara. And this is in the era when George would have killed it. Powell was so big in skateboarding. So this is 86.
Oh, God. Powell Peralta in 1986. Yeah. There's no more dominant company than that.
I sold my stock or shares, whatever we had at the time in Snowtec. Started to work for George. Worked for about 3 months, just kind of meeting with him every now and then. I was just working in the factory doing different things. And he called me in one day, and we sat down, and I was sitting there with George, and Stacy Peralta was there. And George is like, Ernie, we've decided that we're not going to build snowboards. We don't think it's going anywhere. So we're going to expand. We're going to go into clothing, and,
Bones.
You're welcome to stay,
if
you want. And I was like, oh, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it there. And, he was a brilliant man. But I decided to leave because I had known Chuck. Chuck's in the same town. And at night I was hanging out with Chuck anyway. So I left and then just hooked up with Chuck. And that was 86. And that was when we were in this little building called the Ice House across from the beach. And me and Chuck just worked, 20 hours a day. Just me and him hand-built everything those first couple years, And
that's nuts.
So me and Chuck became just, best of friends, and I ended up living with Chuck, and we just kept going. We had a lot of people come, we had investors in some later years that we, expanded in doing things, but, it was always about just, I liked the manufacturing end of things, Chuck was a really good self-promoter, marketing, kind of guy. He was friendly. He could go out and sell you, when you met Chuck, you're a lifelong friend, And
yeah.
I kind of like the behind the scenes kind of thing, but we were doing some really unique stuff, and we were just like, let's put both our names on it, So we just kind of designed by this and that. And
that's rad.
That's kind of where my relationship with Chuck kind of grew from there.
Yeah. So what's the very first board you ever made?
My first board I ever made? It was, it was with Doug Baxendale in my backyard. We were, in the old days, we rode Doug used to have a skateboard shop, and it was in this little town, Brockport, New York, little college town. And Doug was a little bit, 3-4 years older than I was. He was probably 17, 18 at the time. And, I was like 13. And me and my buddies were all skate rats. And we would go in there, and Doug would, give us a bearing or a wheel or something. We had a skate team. We would put on demos everywhere and do everything. And one winter, we got in a couple of these Bob Weber boards from the guy. I think he was out of Michigan. I mean, nobody gives Weber any kind of accolades. And he deserves a lot, So we had this thing, and we were like, holy cow. And this is early 70s. I mean, this is mid 70s at the latest,
Wow.
So we were all fight over these decks, and because they were so much fun, and just, you could get 3-4 inches of snow.
Were they wider than the Snurfers? Were they the size?
Yeah, these were the yellow bananas that
like the shape.
Sims.
Yeah.
These were those.
So
decks.
that exact deck.
Prior to that deck, he had like a 2-part, a separate nose and a separate tail.
Okay, I've seen
Weber had.
Yeah.
I think we started with those, but once he went to that full length yellow banana thing with the skate deck on it and everything.
Yeah.
It was before the skate deck, it was just, I don't even think it was a skate deck. It had we put sky hooks and other stuff on it.
Yeah.
So it was only a couple of those where everybody was always fighting over this. So me and Doug were like, screw this, let's make one. Let's just make our own. So we had been screwing around over the years with fiberglass, and our half pipes we used to coat with fiberglass.
Oh my God.
We were, they'd sit out all winter, and, they have a last, and we made, a portable one that went on a truck that we could cart everywhere and do demos at different places.
Amazing.
Assemble it. So Doug and I, in my backyard, we had made this, we spent all this time making this fiberglass shell that was very similar to the Weber board, but we changed things we didn't like about the Weber board and did that. And we decided we were going to put like a wooden deck on top of this thing, but it was kind of more of a full size, couple ply pieces of wood that filled in all the things, but there's a big airspace in there. So we're like, let's just fill it with foam. So we bought this foam, we mixed it up, we poured it in the shell, we stuck the wood on top of it, we started raising up. I stood on it. Doug stood on it. Started raising more and more. And, because we didn't know how much to mix up. We were just knuckleheads. So we poured in. Before we were done, the thing freaking raised like 1.5 feet off the deck. So we had this great, thing. So we spent like, a week just chopping all that foam away and cutting it down until we could, remount this wooden deck on top. And that deck really didn't work at all. It was like way too stiff. But at that point, we just started screwing around more and more. Doug lived out, we were up this small little town in upstate New York. And Doug's family, his dad was an excavator. They had all this land, these barns and these old chicken coops that we converted into. The original Snowtec was an old chicken coop that me and Doug went in and drywalled it. And literally it was like 6 foot 1 inch tall, and we were luckily, 6 foot or under. So that's where we just started building boards and learning and just making molds and tools and fiberglass, and just writing them wherever we could.
So you were just making them for yourselves at that point?
We were making them for ourselves, but then pretty early on, we started running ads. We had one of the original ads in like Powder or Surfer magazine back in the, late 70s probably, where we did some. I got some old ads and some of the archive stuff I can show you that we did.
So it's pre-Burton, the first couple of boards.
Well, they were, I think, around the same, I don't know what his
77, I think.
Yeah, there was the same kind of era as that, and we didn't really know. That was about the only guys we didn't talk to too much, because they were kind of up in Vermont and we didn't really know too much about them. And
their boards in the 70s too were still pretty snurfy.
Right. Yeah. And I understand, the connection with, the snurfer and everything, Sherman and everything, but I never liked that thing. I was just like, once I rode a Weber, I was like, oh my God, this thing is so much better than that. And that's when we started just screwing around, because the Weber deck, we were skaters. So we rode, fakie or backwards all the time and going off jumps and trying to do things. And that Weber board, you would just stuff the tail. It had no upturn. And that's when me and Doug made the first kicktail on a snowboard.
And so that you had a kicktail on a snowboard. We're talking way before Terry Kidwell.
Absolutely. I have, ads from that day. We've got it in catalogs and stuff. And it's in the Vail Museum, but I don't think it's on display, but it's and the one in the Vail Museum is the very first board we ever built with that kicktail, because it was still a plastic shell, but it had a full on wood insert in it. And it was really nice, real tight side cut on it for the thing. But I was tired of stuffing the tail all the time. So we were just like, let's put a kicktail on it. And I think, Doug
amazing.
had seen, I think there was some old skis back then that had like Olin Mark IVs or something that had kicktails in them. And we were skaters. So we're like, let's just put a kicktail on the damn thing. And
that's
then
amazing.
Years later, of course, then it was around that same time, I think Matt, I think I predated him a little bit, but I don't know by much, when Matt was doing the prop. But the prop was a whole different, thing. I mean, that was definitely a twin tip. It was an asymmetrical, twisted thing. And it was, the construction was different. But, Matt rode that thing, switch stands forward, backwards, just spun around. It was amazing to watch him. And, one of his guys, Vince, I think, his name escapes me. But
yeah, Chuck was saying that he tried to ride the board and he couldn't make it go.
No,
no
way.
Felt like a board with the trucks mounted backwards.
Right.
Like you lean this way and it goes that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever seen them in real life.
Yeah, they're pretty. And, Matt Donovan lives down here, and, he's been a friend of mine for so many years. And Matt was always tinkering with different ideas. And Matt's a genius in some regards, and some of the stuff that he came up with too, because Matt had, no one even knows this, but Matt had the original first patent on a rotational pick your angle binding.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, he could just ratchet it any way you wanted it and lock it in. It was amazing. And he was the first guy to have that.
There is this kind of thing like with Jeff Grell and with Louis
Fournier
about the binding, who was the first.
Right.
And I can remember him being a kid wanting that same story. Like, did Jake invent the snowboard? But then it just keeps getting pushed further and further back. And right. I don't know if you've seen the documentary.
I haven't watched it yet. I plan to, for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And because Tom Sims came out and said that he had a board from 1968, which, predates Sherman's Snurfer. And Jake makes a point of saying, there are a lot of people who tell you that they invented this snowboard, but he has one from like the 1920s from those guys.
Right.
And where is it? It's like Bulgaria or somewhere.
Well, but those are the guys from Turkey, I think.
Turkey, sorry.
But up at the Vail Museum, they have those guys from the U.S. that had built these boards, and they were riding down hills, and there's video of them, and they actually have the actual boards, and I think at the time they were trying to license it or sell it to one of the big companies.
A patent. There was a patent involved in that one, right?
Yeah, this is literally, it's probably the 20s or something. I don't know the dates offhand, but same thing. I mean, there's, any kid that stood up on his sled could say he was snowboarding at the time, right?
Yes.
So we all borrowed from other people, and we fine-tuned different things and different ideas, and we made them our own.
Right, and it seemed like at that time, I mean, I wasn't there, but it seems like you're saying, you get the Bob Weber board, and you're just stoked. You don't care who made the first thing, right? Everybody in the community is kind of coming up with it on their own, right? Like Dimitri, obviously, it came out of nowhere.
Right.
That guy had a functioning snowboard in 71, probably even.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And then you've got Snowtec way back in the day.
Yeah.
Like, it's these little pockets of, it just had to happen.
I mean, we were, at the time, I was 13, 14 when I first started, building stuff with Doug. And, as we were 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old, just crazy testosterone loaded kids that were just on fire. You just wanted to break shit when you're little. And just, that's what, you were. And snowboarding was just another avenue to express yourself away from, the traditional team sports. I played team sports all the way until I discovered skateboarding when I was like, 10 or 11, and I was, forget it, it was never again. I was just like, I'm going to do what I want to do when I want to do it. So, and skateboarding was just, it just furthered your personalities and stuff. And we were just, we were so happy just to be out in the snow, wearing sneakers and just having a good time, wearing old army pants or whatever. We didn't care. We were riding, and back east, we had a lot of snow, but it was, golf courses and, parks and that stuff we rode in. And, as we got older and other people started riding, we learned, they're all riding, Tahoe out here, Kidwell, and those guys are killing it. Yeah. And we're on like golf courses and bullshit back then, It wasn't until like the early 80s when I actually went to a ski hill, and that changed everything at that point, because we were still doing a lot of like fiberglass models and really heavily contoured bottoms, a lot of 3D dimensional stuff. And then I went I think it was like 1981 or so, I went with Doug's brother, Mike. We went to the ski area down by us, and it was in spring conditions. They only had one or two runs open. I went up there to buy a ticket. The lady looks at me and just starts laughing. She goes, "You got to go talk to the owner, this guy, Robin Smith from Swain Ski Center." So I went over to see Robin. He looks at me, looks at the board, looks at me, and just goes, "Well, if you got the balls, go for it." And as I'm walking away, I'm all still, he goes, "Go buy a lift ticket." So I went with a lift ticket, and I literally spent the day just, uncontrollably 360s down that hill, because, we didn't have edges, we had fins, we didn't have anything to set an edge. And I remember going home from there going, we need to change things, because we can't ride on these type of hills and everything,
In 81, yeah. So I was talking with Ken Ock, who you've worked with extensively. He was saying he just realized they never had any barrier to entry, because Doug Lundgren's dad owned or managed the ski hill that was near them. So Doug's dad knew all of them, and they were ski racing at his mountain the whole time. And then they just show up with these boards, and they go on the lift, and because they're kids and they know how to use them, it's fine. It's like right out of the gate.
Oh my!
He's at Fortress, like 79, he even said.
Holy cow, that's amazing.
79, 80, 81. And then the guys from like Drew Hicken and a couple of other guys, but they had to wear skis. They had to wear little,
hike up.
Coleco skis or whatever, and then put those in the backpacks and then they could ride their boards down.
Yeah. Achenbach. First time, so we were up in New York, upstate New York, and I was working in a factory one day, and this is, maybe mid 80s at the work, 84, maybe 85, but probably, even could have been earlier. I get a phone call and I'm like, what the hell? So I answer the phone and it's Ken. He's like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, what? And we just introduced each other. He's like, hey, I'm up here in Canada. We snowboard a lot. It was the first time I ever talked to him. I was like, oh, great. And he goes, hey, can I stop by if I'm ever in the area? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And you couldn't be even farther apart, right?
No. Yeah.
Literally, I hung up the phone. Like 2 days later, I pull into work early morning. It's snowing out. There's a Volkswagen van parked in the parking lot. And I look in and I go, what the hell? It has stickers all over it and stuff. I walk up to it and Ken rolls down the window. He got in this van and drove all the way out there to see us because there was few and far between. Nobody was doing anything back then.
Yeah.
He came all the way out there. We went in the factory, showed him around, and we had, like 100 square feet or something. And then we spent the day, we went snowboarding at the local area. And those guys were just, it was we had a couple hundred vertical feet at this little area, and they just rode as fast as they could, top to bottom, all day long. We rode all day long. We went back. I think we went out, got pizza and beers, and then they left. And they drove all the way back to Calgary. So that was the first time I ever met Ken. It was awesome, and ever since I've just he's dug him. He's
snowboard royalty for sure, international snowboard royalty. But I'm proud that he's a Canadian.
Absolutely. I mean, he was so responsible for those days at Barfoot because he would always come down and pick up boards and drive them back, and all our riders back then were Canadian at the time, or a lot of them were.
Yeah,
and Ken was responsible just for the growth of Barfoot in a lot of different directions back then. So.
Yeah, I was surprised to find that he was, him and Neil DeFern were just making boards up in Calgary too, calling you guys, getting bases sent up, and just,
we would screen print, I think, a few and set them up.
Yeah.
I don't know, Neil, unfortunately I never got to, I met Neil because I went up to visit Ken one time when he was pouring some bindings for us, and he took me over and showed me Neil, and they had this, 2-part steel mold. Neil was laying up those original twin tips that Ken and him did. And it was just, I was like, holy shit, it was pretty amazing. Right. And that was my extent of meeting Neil. And unfortunately, he passed away and everything, but that was, it's just all these small little pockets of guys doing their own thing. And once in a while we would be exposed to somebody else doing something, and we would change ways we were doing things or take that on or share something with them. And I think, if we were like trained classic engineers and stuff, there'd be a lot of stuff we wouldn't have tried. Right. Mm-hmm. Because you would have talked yourself out of it and saying that wouldn't work. But we were just kids and we were like, fuck it, let's try this. And we would try it and it wouldn't work, 99 times. But, every now and then you'd fall into something. You're like, holy cow, that worked really well. And you would never even have tried that. In the later years of manufacturing and everything, we worked with a lot of different really good engineers and everything. But in the beginning days, we didn't have, we weren't even smart enough to take apart a ski or anything. We were just...
That's kind of surprising, but I'm not really, because it comes from the skateboard side of things, right?
Right.
Like, so you got 7-ply skateboards, and they're relatively easy to press with a curved tail or nose. Even easier with a snowboard because it doesn't have to be so abrupt, and you don't need concave and all that stuff, right?
Because we were thinking about, like, we wanted to surf on snow,
Yes.
So when you were a kid, you wanted to be a surfer or a rock star or something. That was it. So, we're upstate New York. This allowed us to be surfers,
Totally.
So we, everything we built was for hiking somewhere and surfing on the snow. It wasn't until, the ski areas opened up that then we're like, oh, it's a variation of a construction of a ski. And that's when we started looking at skis or figuring that out. Back then we couldn't even buy, any material. You couldn't, the first base material, which at the time was P-Tex, I had, I got a student loan when I went to college, like in 82. And I took the whole entire student loan. We sent it off to this company in Europe. And they sent us like 2 rolls of this ugliest blue material, but it was 12 inches wide.
Yeah.
Up until then, we couldn't find anything anywhere. And it was, base material. So all our original Snowtecs that first couple of years were like this ugly, deep blue base material that we got from overseas. And then, but other than them, there was a company out of Connecticut. I think it was TriStar Sports in Connecticut or something. And they, once in a while, there was a lady in there who was their not the production, but she was an orderer. She ordered all the materials and stuff. We can hook her up once in a while. We'd get a couple steel edges here or there from her or something. But
Rad.
I mean, like, cores, we basically reinvented the wood core because we didn't know anything else, and they were already making them for years, but we figured out our own ways to do them. And, so there's, like I said, there was, oh man, Chuck was doing them. Tom was building stuff. There was so many other guys around. Matt, by then it was, Nipper and Hal Burton was the guy.
Hal Burton.
From Glacier.
You're the second guy to bring up Hal Burton.
Yeah. I used to talk to Hal all the time back in the day, and we were just, we never met. I've still never met him to this day, but we would just call each other and go, hey, what are you doing here? How are you doing this? And it was, a lot of open sharing for certain guys.
So was he building boards himself, did it sound like?
My impression was.
Okay.
But maybe not, because, you remember that original... Tom Shea did the original Absolutely Radical or International Snowboard, whatever it was called. Was it Absolutely Radical?
Yeah.
Glacier was one of the only original, there was only 5 companies that advertised in that, and it was Barfoot, Snowtec, Sims, I think Flight, I think it was Glacier, and I'm missing another one, but there was only 5 or 6 companies that advertised, and Hal was one of the guys that advertised.
That's so amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Hal Burton.
Oh, Prop was one. Prop was one. Was the other one. Yeah.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. That magazine, when he first came out, Tom Shea, I remember him telling us about it and, wanted us to put an ad in it. And we ended up, he goes, hey, when I print these, I'm going to send them all to you and you stick them in the box when you ship a snowboard out.
That's great.
So we, he shipped us 500 of these magazines, and what were we making, a couple dozen snowboards. But no, by then though, we were doing a fair quantity of decks, but we put them in every board that we shipped. And I think,
that's epic.
Yeah. It was
it's
cool.
it's the start of that conversation of okay, so snowboarding is a bunch of guys building wood toys in their garage or wood sleds, but advanced, trying to make something that you could ride.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, people getting on chairlifts changes everything. The media opening up changes absolutely everything.
Right.
And you've worked with some of the most iconic dudes, right? Like Burt Lamar.
Yep. After I left Powell and I started working with Chuck for years, we went back to the old Snowtec factory and kind of, took that back and started building all the Barfoot boards in upstate New York. And out here in San Diego, we couldn't find anybody to make us a wood core back then, a vertical laminated wood core. But I knew this friend of mine knew these 2 guys out here called Taylor Dykema, Ron Taylor, Rob Dykema, who owned a really substantial skateboard manufacturing company here in San Diego. So I flew out to see him and they were like, yeah, no problem. We can make these, and he would make us all these snowboard cores, ship them all the way to New York. And then we build snowboards and that. And then in the 1990, 91, I moved out here to San Diego and set up the factory at Taylor Dykema that we were building. And that was when we started building Burt's decks and everything in 92 or 93 when we started building all the Burt Lamar stuff. So yeah, I worked with
That's
Burt
unreal.
And Rankwit and Zabel. Those guys would come in and would sit and design all the boards.
Did you
on the
build
computer.
those Nectar boards? Because they were built out of San Diego, right?
The ones upstairs?
Yeah.
No, those were built in New York.
Those were built in New York.
Yep.
But the company Nectar was out of San Diego.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
because that Zabel board, when he's the gunslinger one, that was built in New York. Yep.
Damn.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so sick.
Yeah, and we also, back Snowtec, we built, oh my God, we built prototypes for Head.
Wow.
Nisel,
Wow.
I still don't know how to say noise.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Or Nicel. So yeah, we built those guys. Had like 20 boards, Nicel like 10 or 20 boards back then. I've seen one since or something, but those guys were even testing the waters back then.
Yeah.
These companies.
Would have been a big difference if they'd gotten in at that point.
Right.
Rossi was really the first one to get in, like substantially. K2, Rossi, K2 around the same time.
Rossi did, when they were seriously getting into it. I remember I was already out here in San Diego, and they came around and toured everybody's factory they were telling, oh, we want you guys to build our product for us. And they brought all their engineers with us, and they looked at every process that we did.
Of course they did.
They went over, they did, of course they didn't, we were just naive enough. We didn't know anything.
And it's exciting to show your stuff to someone who's interested, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the thing. This secrecy in snowboard building, there wasn't really much.
There was a small area at time when there was, because you were a little bit paranoid, but there's no reason to be. After a while, we realized, holy cow, we've spent so much time and, money developing these processes and these tools and this equipment, because you were basically building your own equipment because there was nothing out there that you could go buy. There wasn't snowboard sanders and stuff going on. So, but after a while, we realized, I could show you everything. You still have to go do this.
Right.
So, it wasn't no big deal anymore. I was like, what? Here, you want to see what we're doing? This is what we're doing.
Right.
Good luck to you if you want to go try it. Because I know how hard it was for us to do it. And, if you're new to it and everything. And there was a lot of guys that, a lot of small guys that we used to talk to when we were young that ended up building companies and factories that we shared information. And, that was good. I like that flow of information. From, because it helped grow the sport.
Right. Yeah, you were saying you were listening to the Burt Lamar episode, and he's like, this is how I came up with.
I know. So, everybody has their own
sublimation.
Yeah. Everybody has their own kind of history, right? Everybody's pretty close to it, but from your own angle, your own thing, you think it's one way, where your neighbor's like, no, wait a minute, it was this way, but you're all pretty close. And like they say, history is written by the victors or whatever.
Absolutely, right.
So it was like in 92 when I was out here at Taylor Dykema, me and Rob Dykema were at a trade show, and we were looking at this. There was a product that had a sublimated, graphic on it. And I don't even recall what the product was, but we started looking at that, and we were like, holy cow, could we do something like this on snowboards? So we went back with Ron Taylor. We, found out who was doing this. There was the company Penn Fiber and a couple other guys around. And we started talking to them. We started, researching it. And we originally, I think the first year, we put the material on the bottom of skateboards. Remember all the old slick bottom boards? Yeah. That was all PBT. Right. That was all the original, the PBT, because the PBT couldn't bond. It was made for like washers and stuff like that. For like when it would lock a nut in, it would, I don't know, something to do with the pressure or something. It had to be extruded, and this fiber had to be this remade fiber had to be introduced to it so it would bond. So we kind of had that all going, and anyways, so that year in Barfoot in 92, it was the first year that we did sublimation and everything. And Burt didn't come in until a year later. Right. And then, but what Burt did bring to the table, because I sat him down and we were talking. I said, look, Burt, we're doing this process. It's bitching, but you can do photographs, because we're just doing like kind of a standard artwork on it and, mechanical kind of thing. And you can do, digital process printing. So he went and did that. That's where the Ranquet pull table came from, and some of the other, it was beautiful. Just
game changer.
Yeah. But he, in his interview, he was talking about how he was meeting with engineers and that. I was like, the only guy you met with was me.
Well, I guess you're an engineer.
And so a lot of times in the factories, being in the factory and discovering new process, it's an art. That was art. That's my art. I love doing that. I wake up every day wanting to do more of it. And you come up with different ideas. And at the time, the PBT top sheets this material was a PBT, but it was really textured. Yeah. So you couldn't put like a protective paper on it because it wouldn't stick, Right. So when you press the board, you had to put some like sheet of plastic on top of it. So the only plastic I had was a bunch of clear base material. And at the time I started buying base material out of Crown Plastics out of Ohio. and it was a UHMW. And after you pressed a bunch of boards, you'd start seeing an image in it, in this material that you're using just as a protective layer.
Right.
So I called up the guys and said, hey, how come we're not doing base? And he's like, oh, you can't, base doesn't accept sublimation. You can't do polyethylene, doesn't accept it. I said, bullshit. I sent him a piece that we've been pressing at the low temperature and low pressure. And he's like, oh. So we started trying UHMW, you could sublimate. And so we started sublimating base that year and doing it. And Crown Plastics was very instrumental in figuring out. And then you can see where it's gone since then, what, Mike has done at LibTech and Canoe and everything. They've used some amazing colors and, different, little different way. But that was just that was just some means. We just discovered it, we just were screwing around, just trying to shortcut something. We didn't have a way to stick, peel ply to it or a peel to it, a protective tape. So that's how we came up with doing that.
That's unbelievable. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Lamar thing, because you're building boards for Lamar.
Yeah.
And Jamie Salter buys it? Is that?
Well, Lamar was, they were going great guns for many, many years. And Bert had a partner and, they were doing really, really well. But then, things that one, I don't even know when this was, but in the mid to latter part of the 90s, things started to slow down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So I know Lamar was, they were struggling a little bit, and they ended up deciding to, they sold the company to Jamie Salter from, I don't know if it was called Gen X at the time or something up in Canada, but he was probably up in Toronto. And he was, prior to those years, he was well known in the industry, just coming in and, he was the big businessman. All us other guys were just, we're at the trade shows. We didn't know what we're doing. We're just doing our thing and enjoying it. And I remember one time in Vegas, at one of the trade shows, we were all together in a room, and it was a meeting, and it was all the snowboard guys. Sims was there, and I think even Jake might have been there, or one of his representatives. Chuck was there, I was there, a couple other guys from all the snowboard companies. And Jamie Salter was there, and I think it was just a meeting probably about ASTM standards for freaking screws or inserts or some stupid thing that, we were all fearful of the liability at the time or something, just unnecessarily, but, So we're just sitting there, and then Jamie walks in, and I think he had a 3-piece suit on. We're all just in, T-shirts and stuff, and he just looks at us and just starts laughing and just tells us, you guys are knuckleheads. I'm going to own all you guys in like 2 years. You guys don't know anything about anything, And he just comes right out and says this to us, and we all look at him like, screw you, But of course, and then he went on to pretty much, he probably became the richest snowboarding guy for a long time.
Yeah.
Prior to Jake,
Yeah.
So
And
so anyway, so he was the guy that ended up, my buddy that worked at Lamar called me up in the middle of the night and said, shit, you better get up here because Bert just sold the company to Jamie. And we're like, oh no, not Jamie. So we run up the road the next morning thinking, because they owed us a lot of money, we're like, I'm going to take all my product back for Taylor. And Jamie had already sent a trailer down, tractor trailer, loaded everything up and took it back to Canada. So we ended up working for Jamie Salter for a couple years, just trying to, get paid for that original stuff and more. I mean, everything was paid in full, but it took a while. And then, we were at his bidding for a while. So we were talking about this, how it was a businessman move. How most people, if I owe you money, I'm freaking out. I want to pay you back. But in the big business world, they don't mind if they owe you a lot of money. If they owe you hundreds of thousands of dollars, you can't tell them to go take a hike. You need that money. Yeah. So you're at his bidding, and they take it to their advantage, and they know it, and they use you, and they just burn you, and they know it because they got a hold of you. So lesson learned, right? I didn't go to college. I didn't, I went to college, but where that student loan went. But these are all lessons that we learned. You could be bitter over that, or you can learn from it and go, okay, that was my education. It cost me a lot. And time, money, and stuff like that. But that's how you learn things.
Yeah, for sure. On. Yeah, there's the two diametrically opposed sides of it. That's why I wanted to have Jamie on the show, is that I'd always just written him off.
Yeah.
As I didn't know anything about him. I just heard his name in negative context for 30 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, here's this awful person that's just selling out brands, and once he's got his hands on them, he just, I mean, it's very North American. That's the process, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter whether it's office supplies or toasters or whatever, right? Like Sunbeam toasters at one point were really, really good.
Right.
They were made in the USA, and somebody bought that company and used the goodwill of the name and made crappy toasters and sold them to Walmart. And for a few years, they could make a little extra coin because the name's so good. Right. And then they could drop the prices because they didn't pay anything for them. And Jamie just took that to snowboarding. The thing that sucks about it is that, like, the extent to which he was able to control the snowboard, landscape.
Well, there were so many new people coming in, right? I mean, as we laid the groundwork and you started selling more and more companies coming around and more advertising and marketing, there was just so many new people coming in that didn't really, frankly, care about the history. And why should they, in a sense, right? They just want to snowboard. They think it's cool. They've seen it on TV or in ads. So he was able to tap into those markets, and, it was a commodity to him. I don't even think I don't think he was in love with snowboarding. I just think it was a thing he saw that he could do well with, and he did,
And I could see that feeling about snowboarding. I mean, I can't personally, because what drew me to it was the same thing that you're talking about. Like, you put your feet on the board, and I can remember the feeling of like a snow day in high school. Oh. Like, hey, school's going to be closed tomorrow. Like, I'm going to be snowboarding all day.
Right.
Like, this is the greatest day of my life.
Yeah, I mean, my whole career wasn't altruistic. I wanted to make money. I wanted to, we knew, in the early days we were just building, but after a while we're like, holy cow, if you can make money at what you do for a living, and I'm not, rich by any means, but, I've done okay over the years just to, support my family and buy a house. And that's kind of where I'm at, and I like that. And there's a lot of guys that haven't even reached that level, right. A lot of legends that, the sport owns a lot to that, are still not in that situation. But a lot of guys have done very well. Like, I remember in the old days when we would have, riders that would come ride with Barfoot, and, Chuck's very, very loyal, and he wanted the riders to be super loyal, but they would ride for a while, and we just couldn't compete in Barfoot with, Burton and the other guys. And at times Chuck would be upset that guys would be leaving. But, I looked at it as, man, you've got maybe a couple years at the top of your game, 3-4 years. I'm not going to hold you back from doing your, doing what you can do to maximize that, right? Because, you're going to get injured or something's going to happen. So, I never saw it that way. I just, and, even people that worked for me that moved on and stuff, it was just, hey, they're going somewhere else.
Yeah. Yeah. That's where their life is taking them.
Yeah.
Now.
I mean, I can't.
Personal.
Right? It's not personal. Right. I'm not, it's not going to change my outlook on everything. You keep, I've always said, and it's been used, I ran with blinders on. I just kind of put my head down, did what I thought was best for the people, my family, and everybody that worked with us. And we just kind of did our own thing, and we didn't get too excited about what everybody else was doing. We just kind of kept going. And, there's a lot of companies that have done that, and, you survive, you keep going. So
yeah. Well, manufacturing has outlasted so many of the brands that you manufactured for, right? Like, true. Joyride
we built Joyride for
was
a while.
Flash in a pan on a timeline, but there's an era of it, like where Joyride was just
right,
like the best.
Yeah.
I mean, and then
Ken Green. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we did a lot. I mean, geez, at Taylor Dykeman, we were building boards for World Industries back when they were good.
Yeah.
I think we did some for Atlantis somewhere
nice.
Along the lines. I did a lot of Arbor decks back then.
Rad.
All those Barfoots and all the Lamars, and we did Elevation. I mean, I can't even, I've forgotten more than I remember from what we built back then. But that was kind of, it was fun, as new guys would come with new ideas, and a lot of, we didn't do a lot of generic stuff. We weren't like just putting people's different graphics on stuff. I always wanted the companies coming in to have some investment into it, because if guys just come in and you just putting a graphic on it, they're not loyal to you. They're going to go to the next place. But if they're buying molds and doing stuff, they're a little bit invested to you, and you want them to succeed, and you want to be able to freely share information with them, right? You want to help them come up with different ideas than just going, hey, Lamar has that, thing, do that same thing for my board, you know? So we would kind of be hesitant to that. So we did a lot of exclusive with everybody because, it wouldn't have been fair to, something I developed over the years with Bert or something, all of a sudden just, hey, here you go.
That's the loyalty, right? Like if you're a Jamie Salter businessman, you just give it to anyone who'd pay.
Oh, exactly.
Absolutely anyone could have it. Right.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of dinosaurs in that regard, but
I don't know.
It's kind of the way I live my life.
And, I think that's important. I think this is the soul of the sport. That was the thing I fell in love with at Burton, was that it's not just Donna going around saying, hey, you make that board faster, and hey, you draw that art quicker. No, it's like a huge operation of a bunch of people.
Right.
And you could see that the people take pride in what they're building there. You know what I mean? Yeah. And the innovation, it's so like attractive. It's like, wow, you guys have a fucking 3D printer that you can make working bindings with.
Right.
What the hell are you even talking about?
Right.
Like you could 3D print an imaginary, never been made before binding, all the parts. How cool is that?
It's very cool. I mean, manufacturing's neat. I mean, we were, Taylor Dykema was at one time, we were definitely the largest, manufacturer, at least in the States. I don't know about worldwide, because I think Pelé always built a lot of stuff. But I mean, we were building 70, 80,000 Lamar decks a year.
Holy shit.
Back then. And, we had, 40, 45 people kind of running. So at one time, we were definitely, but some of these guys that are building, over in China when they set up in other places, they're building, we were doing a couple 100, 200, 220 a day, every single day, just running all year long and weekends. And some of these companies are building substantially more than that daily. And that's incredible to me. We always used to joke that we were kind of like the AAA club. We would get guys ready. They were either got really big and had to move on to somebody else that could give them, out of the country where they got a better profit margin than what we could do, in the States. But, we kind of accepted that role because we knew, we can't make a board for you and give you $20 on top of it. There's got to be something left that we got to pay all our employees and stuff. So we would, we knew that some guys never got big enough. They weren't savvy enough to deal with, China. Back in the original days of China, it was hard to go over there and set up and do things. Now it's pretty easy.
Right.
But back then, you had to be savvy. You had to be a good businessman. You had to have a good plan to go over there and have people build your product. But some guys, we'd end up, we'd lose or something. It would go over there and you're like, all right, well, who's the next guy coming up?
Right. I remember going to visit K2 on Vashon Island and sitting with one of the materials buyers and asking him about like, oh, you guys are going to move production to China, because their Vashon Island had become like they were getting people from all over the place and trying to pay it as little as they could because they're a business.
Right.
And so they're going, well, if we take the physical presses, we ship them to China and set up this factory there. He said the things that they'll save on is shipping materials, because they were buying materials from China.
Yeah, the materials are materials.
Yeah. So like if you don't have to ship them to China because they're already there, that saves time and money. And then the labor there was just like...
It's crazy.
He says it's crazy.
And like art,
he said. Yeah,
it is. Yeah. And the weirdest thing, China... So most of the products you build for retail, they're really heavily dependent on the cosmetics. They got to look great, right? I was always good in building something very functional and good, but cosmetics were really tough. That was one of the reasons, we, back in Snowtec days, Doug and I, we, back then when they were building skis, everybody would take, you'd put this ABS top sheet on, when a board was pressed or the ski, they would sand it, then screen print it, then coat it with lacquer and sand it and coat it and sand it and coat it. And the thing looked like a mirror, right? And it was just, all your money went into just this finish. It would look great on the shelf for 30 seconds until you took it out of the wrapping and, it got scratched. So there's no way we were going to do that. So we started saying, screw it. We're just going to pre-print the plastic before we press the board. And yeah, when you pressed it, you got some print through, you see some of the fiberglass in it and stuff, but you know what, who cares? It looked great. We didn't have to do this huge finish and everything. So those were ways that we had to invent to come up with. And no one did that until, we were doing that, just because it was a means to an end. We had to find a way we could survive and make some of these skis. So that's what we did. Rad. But that goes back to the point, like you go to China, like here in the States, I still do, I still build a lot of skates and stuff. And I can only put so many people on the finishing end of things, where in China, they could put 5 or 6 hands on the same process that I can only put 1 or 2 hands on.
Right.
So 6 sets of hands versus 1 set of hands over here. So, so they can spend a lot of time on that end of things, and it'll end up being cheaper than what we can do. So that's the hardest thing to compete with.
If you can get them to ship them to you.
Yeah. Well, they can ship them. You can get them off the boat.
It's going crazy, right? Like the shipping from China thing is a real thing that's happening.
Yeah.
So,
quite frankly, I've been over there, before, and in the old days, you had to be really concerned of quality and stuff. But I mean, look at the stuff that's been coming out of there for years. It's great. It's beautiful stuff. A lot of our U.S. engineers and guys went over there and set up the places. It was nice when you started seeing, it's not snowboarding, but all these little smaller ski companies started coming back, in the States, and guys are in their garage again building them, and they're making them here, which is great, because it's manufacturing is an art, and seeing these guys do it, whatever they're building, I'm just stoked on it, to see it being made here locally. Because the biggest thing about making things locally or here is the fact that you can make changes a lot quicker. You're not ordering a container and then it shows up and it's the wrong shit inside the container.
Right.
It's like, hey, my customer could call me and go, hey, next week, concentrate on this. Don't do these because we're not selling those. So you can relate quicker and make changes quicker than they can, in China and everything.
Like you're externalizing the cost of like, hey, we can't dump, glue and residue into the river behind here.
Right.
But they can somewhere else. So like, hey, let's set up there. That's why it's cheaper. It's cheaper because the labor laws are different. And sure, people get paid, but it's not like here where you want to hire someone, you put an ad on the internet,
right,
and somebody who lives close to here goes, yeah, I could commute to here. It's like groups of workers from the most destitute countries in the world are shipped in to do work that they have no idea what it's going to be. And they're bunked in the stupid factory, right?
They're living
there. Yeah. That's not every manufacturer in China. But, I mean, the externalization of those costs, it's got to be paid out somewhere. So, like, for me, now that I'm almost 50... I'd rather pay Rob Dow to build a board from materials that he's showing me. Oh, which core do you like? Oh, I like this one. I like that. We actually built a board out of a wood core that we made from wood we got from Mount Seymour.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it's cypress. It's yellow cedar. So, like, my buddy is from Haida Gwaii. He carves totem poles, and he's always carving in cedar, red or yellow. And yellow cedar, it can survive in a swamp. It's waterproof. Right. It's like it's insanely resilient.
Is it hard to bond?
No, it bonded fine.
Really? Because you figure it doesn't have oils and stuff in it in order to, I don't know.
The main thing with it, so my friend had skis built out of yellow cedar that broke. He broke 2 pairs of them, but they direct mount those skis.
Okay.
So somebody told me, if you make a sign, let's say you make a sign and you just screw it to, or nail it to your wood cabin, right?
Right.
Log cabin. If you make it out of yellow cedar, it splits like crazy. So because Dow milled the inserts into the core, I haven't had any problems.
Right, exactly.
Because he's got a CNC machine that make it perfect.
Right.
But because this guy's skis were drilled, however many...
Drilled and screwed. Like
they broke right away. Huh. Yeah. So it's a really nice wood. It's extra light and... God, it's beautiful. So, like, it's my favorite board I've ever made, for sure, or ridden. But you can't do that and have it manufactured one of overseas or whatever. No, it's just not possible.
No. Yeah, and somebody's passionate about it. And, that passion, it means something. It it's not going to make I don't know if it makes a better board, but it means something to the consumer who's buying it. That means something to you. You're proud of it. You're proud of the guy building it. You're proud of when it's on your feet and you're riding it. You look down at it, you're like stoked, so it increases your enjoyment of life,
Absolutely.
So
yeah, it's so crazy though, that whole topic though, because I remember working in the shop just feeling negative about the boards being made in China, like just feeling like, it's not right. There's something wrong about it. But then I'm looking at my shoes, they were made in China, my
everything
pants and my socks and my everything. Components for my car, everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when, everybody was like, oh, what the hell, and can't believe you're trading out and doing all this. But, our generation, because I'm closer to 60 now than I'm 59 here soon.
Wow.
But, younger kids now don't have that preconceived notion of China being bad or this or that. Maybe now with everything that's going on, but they didn't care. It didn't mean we were like marketing, thinking people gave a shit, and a lot of people didn't. I mean, kids our age, guys my age, and everything cared.
Yeah.
But the newer generation was like, no, what are you talking about? What do I get a good product that's going on? So, we were worried about that, and there's a lot of different avenues we could talk about, the China influence and everything. But in that regard, that we were just barking up the wrong tree, worried about that, and kids didn't care.
Consumers didn't care. I remember that. Yeah. I remember feeling that and being like bummed, just being bummed on it. The renaissance of snowboard shaping really is right now, though, right? Like, I know Karura, is that it?
I don't know how to pronounce
shapes.
I think I know who you mean.
Yeah. Turned me on to the idea of like shaping boards for your local mountains. You know what I mean? I'd like to go to Japan and ride a board shaped by someone who lives in those mountains, that knows the nuances of those mountains. Right. And that's the way I feel on my wired boards, is that Rob lives and rides these mountains. He grew up on these things.
Yeah.
So the boards that he makes, they ride really well at the mountains that I ride at. It just feels right. It feels good. So
Chuck and I have been talking about this for years, coming out with some brands. I mean, a few years back, we rebuilt some tools and made some prototypes and rode them, but we never got into production. We keep talking about it. It's going to happen at some point, just because there's a lot of old ideas that we did that we didn't have the proper equipment to do it back then, that I want to try again. Some of the dimensional stuff that we did on the boards, I want to build with today's technology, because I think we can make some pretty amazing stuff. It was, over the years, when we were, especially with Lamar, we had a lot of the writers come in and sit down, and, we were just into, more of the, the CAD CAM designing and everything. Mm-hmm. And I remember sitting down, and one of the brightest writers was Don Zabo. Zabo knew exactly what he wanted, how he wanted it. You could sit down with other guys that didn't care. You could give, and quite frankly, they were so skilled that you can give them anything, and they would just rip the shit out of it.
Sean Johnson's just a ripper. Oh my God, yeah,
all those guys. But then but Zabo really, he knew a lot about design and took it to heart, and we would come up and work together to make his product, exactly how he wanted it. And he was really along that way. And other guys, they would get their name stamped in it, and you'd give it to them, and they'd ride it, and they wouldn't care. And
Rankwit talked about going toe-to-toe with Bert, saying, like, I want my name to be the biggest on my pro model. Like, you already got Lamar. That's yours.
Yeah.
This is mine. Like, put my name on it. I'm the rider. This is my board.
Yeah. Mike, I worked with Mike back in those days, and the biggest thing with Mike's, that pool table board, the effective edge was, so far off the snow. If you look at that board, it's way, and that was not common back then, especially for a rider like Mike. But it could hold an edge. He could just rip shit on that board.
He's a ripper. Yeah. Still to this day, rides amazing.
Right. Doesn't he have like new hips too or something?
I don't even know. He doesn't even ride high backs. He rides base plates and straps.
It's amazing. I think Mike could ride anything. I mean, that was always, some of the riders, there's so much respect for that, and just some of the guys we met over the years and just were amazing,
Did you compete with these guys in the early days?
No. I mean, when I was up in New York, we'd go to Canada. I went to some, won some event in Canada, maybe a couple of things up in, it was from Hogtown Skates.
Oh, wow.
They had a contest like in 84, Peter.
Yeah.
And it was just like a slalom and a downhill.
Come on, that's so
rad. We built this crazy
rad.
new board. We went up there. I remember winning a Labatt's blue turtleneck and a case of Labatt's beer.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, that was the extent of my career in actually competing or anything.
Yeah.
I just like to ride, and to this day, I just go with my daughter. Finally, like if your dad does something his entire life, they don't really,
Totally.
It's not cool,
Yeah.
But then she's finally at the age. She's 18. She's a college freshman, but couple years back, the bug finally hit her.
Cool.
So she loves snowboarding now. So we
Rad.
go all the time, and I just ride with her and just screwing around while she's learning and getting better and better every year. And it's just amazing on a snowboard how quick that learning curve is. You got a couple days of pain, but then it's just So there was a lot of just I got this story I'll share with you. We're at one of the riders. I think one of the rider polls that Transworld used to do, where they used to give awards out to the best riders and stuff like that. And this one year it was at, I don't know, one of the clubs somewhere in Vegas, either at the Hard Rock or at House of Blues or something like that. So I'm sitting down at this table, me and a couple other people, and I've been behind the scenes. Not a lot of people know me or something, but at the table right next to us, it was like during the Forum years. I think it was Peter Line and a couple others. They're sitting there and right next to me, and I don't really know him. I know who he is, of course. Brilliant rider, and so every time he got up, like a $5 chip would fall out of his pocket, like a gambling chip. So I would grab it and I'd go up and I'd buy a beer, and I'd buy 2 beers, and I'd come back and I'd give him one.
Nice,
right? And then literally, and he was getting an award every 5 minutes up there. So he'd get up and get up and get up, and literally all night, I must have bought a half a dozen beers for us and stuff. So finally, at the other end of the night, he looks at me and he just goes, dude, I don't know who the hell you are, but thank you so much for buying the beer for me. And to this day, I don't think no one ever knows that he was buying the beer because he kept dropping chips out of his pocket.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it was kind of craziness like that. That was kind of...
What the heck is the naked in a dumpster story? I got to ask.
Oh, all right. Told this a few times. It's so back in New York, we're upstate New York. It's, winter time, fall, winter, and we're in the second story of this building. And every morning I would come in, and we had this one little room that we stored the epoxy in. It was 2-part epoxy. You had part A and part B, and they were stored in these, horizontal kind of positions with valves on them. And it was so cold in this room, and it was always cold in the factory in that area, that I would go in there and open up each drum, pour it into a separate little bucket, try to pour out what I needed for the day, So I go in there, I open up the thing, and I'm always stood there and watched it because, of course, you didn't want, to pour too much out or something. But the phone rings. So I run out, and this is landlines, it wasn't cell phones. So I run out and answer, and there's a buddy of mine. He's wondering if we're going to go snowboarding later that night or something, So I'm talking. I'm just bullshitting with him, and I look out of the door I'm in, and I see this pool of resin just pouring out of this room, just slowly creeping out of this room. I'm like, holy shit, I forgot to turn off the valve. So I run in there, and the partner at the time, Craig, he came in, he's freaking out. I said, run to the store, get as much, kitty litter as you can, because I got to absorb this somehow. So I'm shoveling the resin one way, I'm shoveling the hardener the other way, trying to keep them from merging and meeting. To no avail. Craig gets back. I'm spilling, putting kitty litter, and now I got sludge, and I'm just shoveling it into a 5-gallon metal bucket. And we're on the second story with this, overhang to the dumpsters. So I'm crawling out this window, and it's on this metal overhang, and it's sleeting out now. It's freezing rain. I'm holding on to the window, and I'm just pouring the kitty litter mixture into the dumpster below us. So I'm doing this. I'm making good progress. I've got this whole thing. My shoes are just covered, with kitty litter epoxy mess. So I'm out on the second story on this metal overhang to the dumpster, raining out. And of course I slip, I slide in and I just land right in the middle of that fucking dumpster. And it's just smoldering and smoking because, it's a lot of, it was probably this, this epoxy system at the time that we weren't really, I don't even think, heating mold. So we had to have a really quick curing, kicking epoxy
chemical reaction.
Right. So I land in the middle of the dumpster in all this hot goo. And so I, jump out of there. Things are smoldering. It's, things are starting to catch on fire and shit. I jump out, I strip off all my clothes except my work boots, and I had like underwear and work boots on. And who shows up? This, the supervisor of the building pulls into the parking lot as I'm standing outside the dumpster. Dumpster's smoldering behind his just smoke's pouring out of it. It's all this toxic shit. And he looks at me, and we had to move the next day. Fire department came, and it was this whole big thing. So yeah.
Oh,
so that was probably my worst. I've had a lot of accidents, but that was one of the worst ones. And that it set us back a long time because resin was expensive, and we were like, holy cow.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, so I never lived that one down. It's
well, thanks for telling it on the show, man.
So that's that one.
Man, it's just been a super pleasure talking to you, Ernie.
Thank you.
We have to do this more. You've got a real archive of boards up in the rafters here that are, you got some priceless boards up there. And I know Kevin Kinnear is working on getting like a snowboard museum, like a proper one.
Well, it would be nice to have like a national one, right? Because like the Vail one kind of morphed into something else at this point, and I think, besides that, I know Jeff's trying to set one up, and
Patterson, yeah.
And the only other one's, probably one at Salty Peaks, right?
Have you gone and checked out that stuff?
Never seen it. I got to get up there and see it.
Yeah, I got to go check it out.
I think he's got everything,
Everything.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So, that's kind of like the national museum at this point.
Unofficial. Right.
Because I got boards that were up in Vail for years, and now they're like in storage. And I'm talking about boards that are, the first channel board ever. We were doing the channel on the bindings years before anybody else was. And then, the first...
Like 10 years before anybody else.
And the kicktail board. We got the first kicktail, the fully rotational bind. We got a lot of stuff that, who gives a shit, right? But it's nice to,
I know what you mean. When I worked with Harry Guns from Rad Air, they came up with the 4x4 with F2, right?
Nice.
Like those guys. You know why it's called the 4x4? It's 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So like, I remember being like, you got to tell the world you're the guys that invented this.
Yeah.
And then it's not a thing.
Remember the hole patterns prior to that?
Oh my God.
I had every year we had some different hole pattern and trying to match the bindings. And then on top of that, when we started doing inserts, I've got a museum piece of just, 40 different inserts that we tried over the years that we would make our own and peanuts and all that kind of crazy stuff.
The inserts have someone is manufacturing bulk, like perfect M6 inserts now.
Right.
But back in the day, yeah.
You went through the whole brass thing that didn't work. You went through, making your own out of stainless and this and that.
Brass inserts, right. Heli coils.
And all that.
All that stuff. Yeah, but mostly that's what Salter claims. He claims in his episode that he walked into a meeting with the same guys you were mentioning, and he said, we got to come up with the same hole pattern for everything. Yeah,
because that was back then you build a board, but it would only use your bindings, right? But someone else would build a really good binding, and then you're like, I'm drilling this deck because that binding's way better than the one we built.
I prefer drilling the bindings personally, just because it just was less risky. You know what I mean? You drill, and then even if you missed a little, you could just widen the hole a little bit. And the bindings were pretty skookum, like as far as not breaking. You know what I mean? Compared to the boards, if you drilled through a board.
Remember the foot pain you'd go through?
Foot pain.
Oh, my God. Just
foot pain was awful.
Rubber straps were really comfortable. And then we started building bindings, and none of us got it right for many years.
Yeah.
But finally now, the boots.
I've got 15-year-old bindings right now.
The progression of boots, too, on top of it.
Boots are awesome. Boots are epic.
Man,
so
Intuition
heat molding liners.
Oh.
Oh, my God. Yeah. Yeah, it's night and day. Yeah, but it's kind of moving backwards a little bit too. There's a real resurgence of no-boards, POW surfers,
Right, right.
And I just did that the other day. Not for the first time. I had a no-board with the Burton made pad with the strap.
Oh, nice.
And I rode it on the lifts. It was pretty fun. It's hard. It's really, really difficult.
Yeah, I mean, just for like, I'd like to go back and ride a couple rubber strap things just for the hell of it,
those barfoots that you have here, those are fully functioning rubber strap.
That'd be
super fun.
Small hill, fresh snow. I'd like to go try it, but I'm not going to go back to that. I mean, Jesus Christ. Bindings are great.
Yeah. Bindings are great. Well, I got to tell you, in the Whistler backcountry, like where you've got the steepness and the depth of snow, and you can get your fill of POW runs with your bindings. Really riding a no-board run, holy crap!
Really?
Oh man, your feet are free, man. It's just like this freedom that's not like snowboarding.
Wow.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun. It's the surfing that you're talking about.
Right.
It's the actual surfing, and it takes a bit. Like we heard the story of Andy Coughlin coming in and telling Jake, like, you don't need the rope.
You don't need the rope.
You don't need it.
Yeah.
Like, he had it for so long.
Right.
Like, it was really a long time before they dropped the rope.
Always laughing.
But I understand now, having done the no-board thing the other week, having a rope would actually help you navigate, like when you just need to redirect the board a little bit, and you don't have that thing with your bindings.
Yeah, I'm proud to say I never built a deck with a rope on it.
Never.
It was just too snurfer to me. I was like, no way am I doing this.
Yeah. I see where it comes from, but that's awesome. Yeah. Chuck came up with the rubber, like.
I don't know who did, to tell you the truth.
I don't think he would claim it if he hadn't done it.
I remember you've seen him on Chuck's pretty early and stuff, and I remember I seen some flight decks. Stevie Dura did some stuff. Then we were using rubber straps, but I'm pretty sure maybe Chuck was probably the first. I wouldn't doubt it by no means. Chuck
could just be
ingenious.
the parallel thinking thing, right? Where
who knows?
Because he was saying that they were set up goofy or reg, right? Like so, but everybody was sharing a board,
right?
So if you've got these foot straps that are one way, half the people are riding backwards. But as soon as you put that,
because I think Chuck, I remember he must have, because he did that cleat, like the boat cleat, to tuck him down in there, and so that's it's. Isn't that amazing? It's just crazy stuff that you come up with just for.
It's incredible.
You need something, Everybody else kind of, everybody started doing that. Everybody had some sort of, variation of that. So,
I'm really excited if you and Chuck made the freak style shape that flexed.
Right.
I'd like to see what that rode
what do you
like.
Mean? Those flexed. They didn't flex very well, but there was
not much. Yeah. I'm just thinking like a modern
version
flex of that. Like same shape.
Yeah.
Come out of the same press.
I know. I can't believe some of the stiffness of stuff we used to build.
Oh yeah. Well, like you said, there was a bit of a fear. I'm referring to you saying like fear of lawsuits or fear of. Like when you're doing the AST standards, but there was also a fear of making a board that would break. Like I would see it with companies where their boards would just be like
rocks,
too thick,
right?
And then the next year they'd be too thin, because they heard from everybody, hey, your boards are too thick, and then they would overdo it.
Well, it also became. The softer boards were easier to learn on.
They're so much more fun for small mountains.
Yeah, for small mountains, they were more fun. They were easier to learn on. So as everybody knew we're coming into the game. I mean, I like, I don't know, they're still, nowhere near the stiffness that they used to be. But if I'm riding a lot and a thing, I don't mind a stiffer board than, like one off the shelf or something. But for the most part, the softer boards were in softness, covered up design flaws.
There you go.
So that was a lot of some of the earlier boards and some of the other companies that came out. They weren't designed really well, but they were soft enough so they worked. You could torsionally flex them with your feet just going. Where, a stiffer board, you had to be pretty much on, or it would really be bad.
Yeah. So if it's poorly designed and stiff, it's harder. It's impossible to ride. You're fishtailing around all over the place instead of you put it on edge and it just keeps going straight.
Yep.
Like an old Jimmy Scott. He just really liked no side cut on his, because he was just riding pipe.
But he rode, I don't know. I mean, his ones for Lamar, we had a little bit going on.
He had an 11-meter side cut. That's a big side cut. I prefer an 8. You know what I mean? Like 8-meter side cut on a 55 to 60 centimeter, 155 to 160. It's perfect. I love it. Just blends so perfectly.
Wow. That's awesome.
24 centimeter waist.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the deal.
Well, thanks, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ernie. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for all the work you've done in snowboarding over the years. I can't believe that we've never really talked before this year.
Yeah, I don't come out of my shell too often.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you're behind the scenes guy.
Yeah, I'm just, content doing my thing. I don't care about the fashion or the accolades. I just kind of do my thing.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for, seeing those boards today, I'm like, wow, you have had a lifetime of being like right in the scene.
It was a lot of fun, and it still is. Yeah. So, hopefully those days aren't over.
Yeah,
something else we can come up with. But it's still, I still get up every day. I love it. Go to work, invent new shit, make new stuff, go ride, still, especially now with my daughter at that age. It's
perfect.
So much fun. So,
yeah. Do you surf as well?
No, I don't. I
don't
live
surf. Here. You don't surf.
I don't surf, man.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I grew up back east, and by the time I moved out here, I love the snow, and I love that, and skate. I skate all the time, and I like, snowboarding, but surfing, I just never, I don't know.
Do you get to that pump track ever?
No, I've never done that.
Oh, you got to go, man. It's so much fun. Yeah. It's beyond. You have one of the best pump tracks in the world, just a few miles from here.
Yeah, I hear about that.
It's epic.
Yeah, I'll go try that.
Go early in the morning when there's nobody there.
Yeah.
You'll have a blast. It's epic.
Well, also, I just wanted to, say, thank you to everybody I've worked with, especially the guys that have worked for me, over the years. It's just, without, your crew of people, you got a good crew, you can make anything, and do it really well. And I'm really thankful. And my wife, Connie, and my daughter, Corinna, thank you guys for everything, and many more years to come.
Yeah, you bet, Ernie.
Thank you.
Right on, man.
All right.
Thanks, dude.
Awesome.
FNRad shoutouts this week to Ernie DeLost and Jeff Patterson, who put me on Ernie's trail earlier this year. Also, if you need a real estate agent, get in touch with Ken Ock. He's the real deal, and he's got you covered. If you need his information, DM me, and I'll get it to you. Extra special thanks to Chris Green for the Craig Kelly as my co-pilot stickers, and to all you listeners reaching out this week about how you're enjoying Season 7. I love it. That's amazing. I found a Lamar West Makepeace board yesterday that was confirmed made by Ernie DeLost's company, Capital L Manufacturing. And I got to tell you, for a 30-year-old board, the thing is surprisingly rideable. I'm going to probably try it out before I give it to the man himself, Wes Makepeace, legend. All right, you guys, be sure to come back next week for another episode of the FNRad Snowboard Podcast, presented by Vans and brought to you by SIA Productions.